Welcome back to the Art Lab. Valentine's Day is coming up and we're not going to do complicated or expensive. We're going to have some fun in the Art Lab and try some new experiments. Today we're running 4 experiments to make low pressure valentines. We're doing a scrap challenge to use up our trash, a gouache experiment with some very specific art puns, a foiling technique that costs under $5, an embossing technique that feels like magic but is actually just science. Grab a warm drink and let's get into the lab. I'm using a box of Recollections blank Valentine's cards that I got on sale for 40% off. You can use any paper you have laying around for these experiments. First up, the scrap lab. If you're like me, you like keeping crafting treasures, precious pieces that are pretty and you're afraid to use them. I'm giving you permission to let go and share your very best with your loved ones. Letters don't have to be hard. You can do this in 2 ways. If you are skilled at writing backwards, go ahead and write your phrase in reverse on the back side of your pretty paper. You can also write your phrase face up on scrap paper, cut out your letters, then flip them backwards and trace them on the back side of your pretty paper. I used a flat edge to create a line so we can make sure our letters go on straight. We're going to cover it later. I'm using Tombow multi-glue for this video. I don't recommend it for these letters. It has a purpose later on in this video. When it dries, any glue that is exposed is extra sticky, so any glue that was sticking out on this card kept sticking to my fingers and it was not fun. Don't do what I did, learn from my mistakes. I suggest a glue stick here. Less moisture will help keep the paper from buckling. Next, I'm going to cover my line by gluing down some crystals. You can get creative here and use lots of other materials like ribbons, scrap paper, stickers, or whatever you have laying around. Boom! Just like that, we have an ultra cute, simple Valentine. Experiment number 2, candy hearts. But we aren't doing the standard be mine. We are artists, so we need big canvas energy. Does anybody remember when they stopped making these and it was a whole thing? Today we're going to celebrate that they're back, a staple in the Valentine's tradition. I'm using my favorite set of Holbein pastel gouache. I like the idea of gouache or acrylic paint for this experiment because it mimics the chalky look of the hearts. I matched each color heart to a color from my collection. Because my paint is opaque, I decided to use a light pink card to give it some visual interest. Next, I'm using a pencil to sketch my hearts. Then I'm going to erase the heavy lines, but not all the way. I'm going to leave a ghost outline. I went over the outline with a deep magenta paint pen to match the red lettering on the candies. I painted the hearts with gouache, then let dry before moving on to the next step. After the paint has fully dried, I started writing my hilarious art puns on the hearts. I used a pencil first to avoid mistakes. I went over the outline again and then used the pink to write out the letters. For our puns, we have Big Canvas Energy, You Make Me Blush, Draw Me, Hue and Me, In My Color Era, and Art Date. For this Valentine, we're practicing a new skill. I'm not perfect at this, but it was a lot of fun to try. We're doing foiling. First up, I'm using a circle stencil to make the top of my hearts, then using a straight edge to connect them to the bottom. Next, we're using the secret ingredient, Tombow Multi-Glue. This glue is important for this project. If you use it wet, it's permanent. If you let it dry, it's super sticky. I got way too much glue on my card. When you start, you should start with less and add more if needed. I used a paintbrush to fill in my hearts. This technique did leave a texture of brush strokes. If that's not your jam, make sure your glue layer is flat before it dries. Make sure the layer is complete but not too thick. Set aside and make sure they are completely dry before moving on. I did this step first, then worked on my other Valentines while the glue dried. These foil transfer sheets are only a couple of dollars at Michael's, and there's 5 in a pack. Take your transfer sheet pretty side up and press it right onto the sticky glue. You don't need heat, just pressure. Give it a really good rub. You're basically pushing the foil off of the plastic carrier sheet and onto the sticky glue. The plastic should peel right off, leaving the foil behind. Look at all that shine. No crazy tools needed. My heart is textured, so I'm not worried about going back in with the foil. If you want a super smooth look, I would not use anything hard or abrasive to push the foil onto the glue. For example, don't use a credit card to rub the foil because it can scratch the pretty side. I'm going to finish this card by adding some glitter sticker hearts for added texture. I'm also gluing a few hollow lightning bolt glitter pieces around my heart because I'm going to go with an electric vibe. My finishing touch is using this old school Dymo label maker. I like that you have to turn the wheel and click the handle and it punches the letters into the plastic tape. It gives it such a retro embossed look. And there we have it, an inexpensive experiment that can make a high-end looking card. On to our final card. This experiment is my favorite. We're going to be using embossing powder. I started by tracing my card onto the back of my scrap paper. I took my paper cutter and cut it to the perfect size. I've got a scrap of cream cardstock that we'll be using to write our message on. I'm using some Tombow dry permanent adhesive tape to tack my pretty paper to the front of my card. I'm using a Tim Holtz Distress embossing powder pen to write my message. This is important. This clear ink dries just sticky enough to hold the embossing powder in place. I'm using Recollection's gold embossing powder, which I believe is actually discontinued, but you can still find Tim Holtz brand embossing powder online. Using the embossing powder is as easy as using glitter. You cover up your marker lines completely, then tap off the excess and return to the container. Because of static, some of the fine powder flecks will stick to other parts of the paper. I like to clean it up with a soft paintbrush. Be careful not to touch your lines because the powder isn't permanent yet. This step is the magical one. I used my heat gun to activate the powder. It is important that we use the sticky pen because the heat gun does blow air and the powder would be blown away. Once the powder reaches the right temp, it melts onto the paper. It looks like magic. I could do this all day. It was so much fun. When finished, I tacked this cardstock with our embossing powder onto our Valentine's card. And there we have it, a super pretty embossed card. Four vibes: the scrappy, the punny, the shiny, and the embossy. Let me know in the comments, are you a big canvas energy or more of a scrap treasure person? Remember, art should be relaxing. Don't stress the details. Subscribe to stay up to date with my latest videos. See you next time.